Scouts regularly praised his defensive instincts, his natural athletic ability, and his unusually high basketball IQ for someone his age. But even back then, even as a teenager who hadn't finished high school yet, there were whispers trailing him everywhere he went. There were people saying he wasn't good enough to make it on his own. There were people saying the only reason anyone knew his name was because of his father. And those whispers never stopped, not for one single day. And then in July of 2023 something happened that pushed basketball completely aside. Something that reminded everyone that before Bronny James is a basketball player, he is a human being. Bronny suffered cardiac arrest during a practice session at USC because of a congenital heart defect. And for one brief terrifying moment, the entire basketball world held its breath together. He was rushed to the hospital. He was sidelined for months. And he had to fight and scratch his way back onto the court while everyone watched and wondered if he would ever play again. When he finally returned to action in December 2023, making his long-awaited college debut against Long Beach State, he showed glimpses of everything scouts had admired about him, contributing 4 points, including a transition three-pointer, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block in just 16 minutes off the bench. Over 25 games that season, he averaged 4.8 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 2.1 assists while shooting 36.6% from the floor. Those numbers on paper weren't going to impress anyone. USC finished the season with a disappointing 15-18 record and missed the NCAA tournament completely. But the simple, undeniable truth that this young man was even standing on a basketball court after suffering cardiac arrest, that alone should have earned him a level of respect and appreciation that unfortunately and unfairly he never really received from the public. His best moment during that freshman season came on December 30th, 2023, when he scored a career-high 15 points on 6 of 11 shooting against Oregon State, hitting pull-up three-pointers, a breakaway dunk that got the crowd roaring, and the kind of aggressive defensive intensity that made NBA scouts genuinely believe this kid had real professional potential. Against number 12 Arizona on January 17, 2024, he played a season-high 30 minutes and delivered one of his most complete performances with 11.6 assists and 5 rebounds, showing his ability to run the offense and crash the boards at a high level. And on February 1st against Oregon, he handed out a career-high 7 assists along with 6 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 steals, proving that when given real minutes and actual responsibility, he could affect the game in ways that didn't always appear in the scoring column. But here's the thing nobody wanted to admit back then. None of those performances mattered to the critics, because in the eyes of the harsh, unforgiving public, Bronny James wasn't a young man courageously bouncing back from a life-threatening medical crisis who was finding his rhythm on a losing college team. No, he was LeBron's kid. And LeBron's kid was supposed to be dominating every single game he stepped into. LeBron's kid was supposed to be a lottery pick. And when that perfect story didn't play out the way people expected, the conversation around Bronny flipped from compassion and support to ridicule and criticism almost instantly, like a switch flipping in the worst direction possible. On April 5, 2024, Bronny decided to enter the NBA draft. And the Los Angeles Lakers picked him with the 55th overall selection in the second round, making LeBron and Bronny the first father-son duo in the entire history of the NBA to share a roster at the same time. And while that moment should have been a beautiful, historic, once-in-a-lifetime celebration of family and determination, and for the James family it absolutely without question was, the rest of the basketball world didn't see it that way. Not even close. The accusations of favoritism came rushing in like a flood that simply would not stop crashing down on this young man's head. Critics aggressively argued that without LeBron, Bronny's resume, including poor shooting numbers and limited college production, would not earn him a draft pick, a roster spot, or a contract. Others pointed to the Lakers' own long history of family favoritism through the Buss family's generational ownership and questioned why Bronny specifically received such extreme hate when family connections have always been part of this league since the very beginning. Some commentators even called it black nepotism, suggesting it was actually a positive challenge to old barriers in a league absolutely filled with family ties and inherited advantages. But the loudest voices, the ones that got the most clicks, the most views, and the most engagement, were the ones happily tearing this young man apart piece by piece. And the painful truth is, none of that outside noise and public ridicule compared to what was supposedly happening behind closed doors, away from the cameras and the microphones. Because from the very start, from the moment Bronny James first walked into that Lakers facility as a professional basketball player, the whispers began. Not from the media, not from online trolls, but from inside the locker room itself. Cracks beneath the surface. The first real signs of serious problems emerged during the 2024 NBA Summer League. And what should have been a celebratory, exciting start to Bronny's professional basketball career quickly turned into something far more complicated and far more painful than anyone expected. According to multiple reports that came out in the weeks after Summer League, an anonymous teammate expressed deep frustration, saying that Bronny was treated like someone separate, not like the rest of us, creating a level of resentment and irritation among the team that seriously hurt the group's ability to develop any real chemistry on the floor. A US Sun insider added more detail, noting that kind of tension didn't help the players build chemistry. And while the source made clear there was no personal dislike toward Bronny as a person, the team dynamics were clearly damaged by the perceived special treatment he was receiving from coaches and the organization as a whole. And it wasn't just one isolated voice saying this. Multiple accounts backed up the story, pointing to visible tension and a clear lack of team unity, with Bronny being seen as the featured player on the roster even though the team was supposed to be working toward shared goals and collective effort. The anonymous player even added that the whole group was eagerly counting down the days until Summer League ended, showing just how badly the situation had damaged any chance of real team bonding. Meanwhile, Bronny himself was averaging just 4.3 points per game on poor shooting numbers, which only made the perceived favoritism hurt that much more for the players fighting desperately for their NBA futures right alongside him. Players who didn't have a famous last name to protect them. Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, Summer League is known to be a high-pressure environment. Bronny James just made an announcement that caught everyone off guard. After months of rumors about fights in the locker room, arguments with teammates, and constant public criticism, LeBron James' son has finally spoken out. And his words have shocked the basketball world completely. But when you look past everything, the situation is actually much more painful than people realize. The announcement that broke so many hearts. When you remove all the outside noise, the endless debates about favoritism that flood social media every single day, the whispered gossip inside locker rooms that grows more twisted each time it's repeated, the online attacks from people hiding behind screens who could never handle the pressure this young man faces every moment. What remains is simply a 21-year-old kid who loves basketball. Nothing more complicated than that. Bronny James has never wanted anything except to play the game he loves. And the truly sad part of this whole situation isn't that Bronny James' numbers aren't impressive or that he's struggling to get minutes on the court. What really breaks your heart is that Bronny James has now admitted publicly with a calm sadness that settles deep in your gut that he has become a version of himself that the world forced him to be. Not the version he imagined as a child watching his dad drop 50 points night after night. Not the player he dreamed about becoming. Instead, he became the version that keeps him protected. The version that makes himself small enough to stay out of the line of fire. Because when Bronny sat in front of reporters after a February 2026 game against the San Antonio Spurs, a game where he scored 12 points, grabbed 3 rebounds and dished out 6 assists in 25 minutes while shooting 5 for 10 from the floor, which was his best performance of the season. He didn't want to talk about his scoring. He didn't bring up the highlights, the smooth shots, or the numbers he posted on the score sheet. Instead, he talked about playing defense. He talked about being the player who handles the unappreciated work. The gritty, unglamorous effort that never gets shown on highlight packages or Sports Center. And when someone asked him what gives him more personal satisfaction, creating offense or locking down on defense, his response revealed everything about where his mind is right now. Yeah, I do say defense. I mean, that's my role, the thing I want to be really good at, especially with this team. And then came the part of his answer that truly felt different. We've got a lot of guys like Luka, LeBron and Austin Reeves. So those guys can score whenever we need baskets. In that moment, Bronny accepted his place in the pecking order. He listed the stars surrounding him: Luka Doncic, his own father LeBron James, Austin Reeves, and without any hint of resentment or jealousy in his tone, he quietly and clearly accepted a supporting role beneath every single one of them. Stop and really think about that for a moment. Let it sink in completely. This is a young man who grew up watching his father dominate the NBA in ways few athletes in any sport have ever dominated anything. A young man who once dreamed of scoring those same baskets, making those same plays, hearing those same crowds roar his name. And now here he is at 21 years old, sitting in front of cameras, telling the whole world that his happiness, his fulfillment, his purpose on the court doesn't come from scoring anymore. It comes from defending. It comes from doing the tasks nobody puts on posters. It comes from being the player who quietly gives up everything so others can shine and take the credit. And the reason this hits so hard is because if you actually look at his G League stats, 22.6 points, 5.4 rebounds, 4.4 assists, and 2.2 steals per game on strong shooting numbers, you realize quickly that Bronny absolutely can score. He can create his own shot, he can run an offense. He can be that player when he's given the chance and the freedom to play. But the NBA has not consistently given him that opportunity. And the overwhelming non-stop pressure of being LeBron James' son has practically forced him to shrink into a role that protects him from the harshest criticism. Because if you label yourself as the defensive specialist, if you market yourself as the grinder who does the unappreciated work, then nobody can attack your scoring stats. Nobody can say you're taking shots you shouldn't be taking. You become invisible in both the best and worst possible ways at the exact same moment. And when asked about guarding Victor Wembanyama in that same Spurs game, the tallest player in the entire league, Bronny didn't hesitate, didn't make excuses, didn't back down. Different for sure. Being one of the smaller guys on the floor against the tallest guy in the league. So it's definitely a challenge. He paused briefly, letting those words settle, and then spoke with the quiet, steady determination that reveals who Bronny James really is at his core. But I'm up for anything. I'm up for anything. 7 words. Yet those 7 words carry the full weight of everything this young man has gone through over the last 2 years of his professional career. A young man who constantly hears from the world that he doesn't deserve to be in this league. Constantly attacked from every direction by people who have never even met him. And his reaction isn't bitterness. It's not anger. It's not demanding a trade or throwing a fit. It's simply I'm up for anything. But to really understand why those 7 words carry so much weight, why this announcement about embracing the grind and finding happiness in defense feels so emotionally heavy, you need to know the full story of how Bronny James arrived here. And that story begins long before he ever wore a Lakers uniform. The burden of a name. You see, there are certain last names in professional sports that carry so much weight, so much history, and such impossible expectations that the moment you step onto any court, any field, or any stage, people have already decided who you are and what you should become before you even get the chance to prove them wrong. And across the entire NBA, a league that has watched dynasties come and go, a league that has produced some of the most legendary athletes the world has ever seen, there is probably no last name that carries more gravity, more pressure, or more suffocating expectation than the name James. Because when your father is LeBron James, a man widely considered the greatest basketball player to ever put on sneakers and step onto an NBA floor, every single thing you do, every shot you take, every minute you play, every word you say, and every look on your face gets examined under a microscope so powerful that no 21-year-old should ever have to deal with that kind of constant, never-ending public attention. Born on October 6, 2004, Bronny grew up in that brutal spotlight as the oldest son of a worldwide icon. He attended Sierra Canyon School in Los Angeles, where he quickly proved himself as a real talent on his own merit. He was rated a 4-star recruit and ranked number 20 in the ESPN 100 for the class of 2023. He played in major events like the McDonald's All-American Game and the Nike Hoop Summit.